Hi guys. So it's almost dinner time, so I'm gonna do this as kind of more of a quick steak marinade rather than one that I would like have sat for a long time. I usually want to, if I'm gonna do a marinade, do at least 1 hour, but really like 2 to 4 hours is probably gonna be your golden window, and I wouldn't go much longer than a couple hours for this particular marinade, because what's going to happen is that the acid in this marinade is going to tend to cut in too much, and it's just going to be very vinegary. But we want some of that for our steak. So, as far as like the cuts of steaks go, I found that this particular marinade really does really well even with bad cuts of meat. So I want, so it's one that I kind of use all the time, and even if I'm using like a tri-tip or something like that, that's kind of a tougher one, less flavorful steak, it actually can bring out a lot more flavor in that. So I will say that a lot of people are very divided and ferociously so when it comes to how steak is cooked and prepared. And in this case, since I would have my steak in a Tupperware here, when I put the marinade in, halfway through I'm going to flip the steak. And if it's folded on itself, I need to make sure that it's folded the other way for some time as well, so it can actually get a pretty good covering. But generally speaking, like a lot of people believe that are very strong that the meat itself does enough of the work, and that if you are, if you want to put anything on it, it's just going to be a little bit of salt and pepper, and that's it. And that's perfectly fine. You guys can totally do that, and I really don't give a shit. But this is one of the ways that I did it, and it's based on a steak marinade that I had when I was a kid that comes out of Gartner's meat butcher shop in Portland, Oregon. So when we do a marinade, I'm going to put in this case, I'm just going to put in a spoonful of brown sugar. This just kind of balance out that acid a little bit and just give it a little hint of sweetness. You can also use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce in this, which I commonly do. I'm going to grind up a shit fuck ton of black pepper, right? And I can do the fresh stuff. Toss that in. A little shake of paprika. Okay. And I personally like to use a smoked paprika on this. If I were doing a more long marinade, where like maybe I make the marinade a day in advance, and then 4 hours before I cook, I go ahead and I put the meat into it. Then I'm going to use like fresh garlic and fresh onions and all that, because I think that's you're going to get a lot more of that character. But in this case, since I'm going to be cooking this in an hour, it's not going to have time for those flavors to leave the onions and the garlic and then go into the steak. So I'm just going to use a little bit of dried ingredients here, and that's okay. I find that it doesn't really affect this particular recipe too terribly much. Again, with salt, I tend to be conservative, right? So I'm just going to, that's a bit much, right? So, this is probably half teaspoon or so. Then oil. Again, this is going to help cut that acid a little bit. Normally I'd be using an avocado oil, but my former roommate left this vegetable oil, and this is probably a decent use of it, I guess. Vinegar. And vinegar is like the cheapest ingredient here, and it's the one that's really going to carry the marinade into the steak. And then the most important thing to me actually is Dijon. And you can use like a English mustard, you can use a brown mustard. I probably won't use a yellow mustard, I don't think it's going to cut in nearly as well, but a Dijon is really going to cut in, it's going to really give that a good amount of flavor here. And you'll probably find that this particular marinade, it is particularly flavorful enough to really make a big difference in your steak. Especially since, I'm using the vinegar, I'm using the Dijon, and I'm using a couple other flavor elements here that are really going to just pop, right? And I've changed my mind. I am totally going to use Worcestershire today. You can also drop in, cayennes or other spicy peppers or something like that. That was a bit heavy on the Worcestershire. Because again, Worcestershire is going to be a sweet flavor. Now, for those of you who don't know what Worcestershire sauce is, it's actually an anchovy sauce. That's British, so it's, yeah, a little bit fun there. Now, I'm using a big piece of steak here. One, because it's going to be easier to grill. Two, because there's going to be less availability for the meat to go, or the juices to go out as it cooks. And yeah, it's just going to be a little bit of an easier time cooking. So in about half an hour or so, I'm going to flip this steak in here. Because, the marinade at the moment is just kind of sitting on top. But if I flip the steak, then it's going to sit on the top on the other side. And then we're going to have more flavorful covering, or more covering. Now again, if I was going to do like a overnight marinade, I might actually put in like some rosemary sprigs or something like that to just give it more herbal presence. And I think that rosemary is one of those things that really does well as at least creating an aromatic in there. If you wanted to, there are ways of basically threading rosemary into your steak to kind of give that flavor. I've tried using flavor injectors, and I find that they're like, I don't really care for them as much. But if you're doing a pan-seared steak, right, because you don't have to do it on a grill, I'm doing it on a grill tonight, you can totally like throw your oil into the pan and then drop your rosemary sprig in there right before you put in the steak, and that's going to actually give that aromatic to the steak, but you're not going to get like a lot of that strong rosemary flavor there. So so yeah, this is just like really a basic thing for me. Now again, when we cook a steak, I tend to start it off really high, and I let the grill go for probably 3 or 4 minutes before I actually put the meat on the grill. That's gonna just let that metal that my steak is going to be sitting on to actually get really hot, so that when I put the steak on it, it's going to sear and create the grill marks in it. Now, the way that you do like the classic grill marks, right, is if you put your steak on here like this, right, you're going to cook it for a while, and then you just flip it like that, and then flip it over and do the same thing, right? So it's not really that complicated of a thing to do, but I think it's more of a presentation showy thing to do, and more associated with a place like Sherry's or whatever, and it requires more tossing over of the steak. Now, generally speaking, unless you're cooking really hot from the grill and it's and you're burning the steak, I would recommend flipping it as little as possible, right? And so depending on how well done you like to have your steak, you might leave it on for like 5 or to 7 minutes on one side, then flip it over for 5 to 7 minutes. And then when you take it off the grill, you want to go ahead and set it down and let it sit for like 5-10 minutes before you cut it open. And that, even like when I'm using this big piece of steak that's going to be like 3 or 4 servings, I'm not going to cut it into those servings until it's sat for a while, because I want that juiciness to stay in there. So basically what's happening a little bit is that hot air moisture rises, right? So wherever the heat is, the moisture from that steak is going to go up towards the top to the rare side, and then you flip it and come back up this way. And it needs to kind of have some time, because it's going to get kind of condensed in there, because it's going to have nowhere to go because of the seared top. And then as it relaxes, it's going to go back out into the steak as it cools a little bit, and so you're going to have a more thorough juiciness throughout the entirety of the steak. Now, again, to kind of test your steak for wellness, there's open mouth. That's kind of rare. You know what a raw steak kind of feels like. And then you have kind of this medium rare here, and this is going to be kind of a well done here. So where you just touch that part of your hand as or your face or your hand as kind of a gauge, right? So this part would be kind of, it's a little tough, so it's kind of that rarer side of medium rare, maybe rare there, and then it's going to be like well done. Maybe this little patch right here where there's less movement, that's going to be kind of your medium to medium rare section there. So just kind of feel it out, literally, or you can use a thermometer. Generally about 135 is a good temperature for the center of your steak. And a lot of times for me, like, I will actually put like blue cheese on top of my steak. It doesn't take a whole lot. It's a very pungent flavor, and I usually don't do it when I use this particular marinade. It's usually if I don't have time to do this marinade, like tonight. I will go ahead and I will put like blue cheese on top of this, or I'll make a blue cheese sauce and put that over the top, because it's not going to take very much for it to become very flavorful and really complement that steak. you could also use like grilled shallots or something like that. And even in this marinade, if you wanted to, you could actually fry up your shallots and garlic first, especially if you don't have time to let it sit in that marinade overnight. And that will help actually release all that and use that as your oil going into this, right? So the garlic and onions already infused in that before you put it into the container. So just a few things on how I do a steak. Obviously, I'm probably going to get a fair amount of hate messages back being like, no, you don't put stuff, you don't marinate a steak, you don't put rubs on steak. The steak is perfect as it is. And frankly, I don't care. Right, I really don't, because I do enjoy a salt and pepper steak, but generally speaking, like, this marinade blows my mind. So, yeah, that's what I got for you guys for today. I hope you enjoy it, and we're just gonna pair this with like a salad, so it's not gonna be something spectacular I have to show you tonight. I'm thinking that tomorrow I might do a kind of Mediterranean style flatbread for you. So we'll see if that actually pans out. So I'll see you guys later. Have a good night.